Thank you for joining the October 20th Operations Committee meeting. We can get started with the transportation update.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Let me share my screen. Can everyone hear me fine?
A little bit louder for me. Oh no, I'll turn mine's up.
Okay.
Thank you.
hmm And let me know if it doesn't help, and I'll try to project a little more.
No, I'm good.
Okay. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Yes,
Perfect.
thank you.
First, thank you all for taking time to even listen to the transportation update. We definitely appreciate and value your feedback. Before we get into the details, I just want to give you a high-level view of what transportation normally looks like. There are five particular areas where we transport students. MTA, which is conducted by the MTA. Corner-to-corner transportation is done by us via yellow buses. We service primarily elementary students, and it's yellow bus only. The eligibility criteria for the corner-to-corner routes are the students must live greater than a mile from their school. Our curb-to-curb transportation, which is our heaviest yellow bus population, um, ranges from IEP students to 504 homeless students, ESOL, and we also traditionally allow siblings to ride with their eligible siblings. So a student who has a sibling who's eligible under IEP or something like that could ride to the same school with their sibling. Swing space transportation is similar to corner to corner and how it works, but this is primarily for the swing space schools and extracurricular and special events like athletic games, special Olympics, and things of the sort cover the extracurricular uh, activity. And out of all of the yellow buses that operate, we are approximately 95% contracted out. So our city schools own fleet only operates about 5% of our routes. So as far as the COVID-19 transportation strategies that we've implemented and are implementing, we are requiring staff to wear face masks and or shields. The face shields are optional for bus staff, but in addition, we are requiring students to at least wear a face mask before entering the bus. We're also following social distancing guidelines when feasible, so that's one student per seat, skipping a seat in between just to allow space in between each student, as well as the bus attendant that sits on the back of the bus. Um, we are continuing our regular, but we're also intensifying our cleaning protocols. So we clean the high touch points in between routes, but the bus gets a thorough cleaning at the end of each day after all routes are complete. Um, we've also conducted training for staff about the importance of health and safety guidelines when commuting, and the bus staff that we train are actually training the students, as they're new to these new protocols that they are um, adhering to. Additional notes, students will be picked up and dropped off from their residential address only. In the past, we would allow like a different PM drop off than so we may pick up from grandma's house in the morning, but drop off at dad's house in the PM. Now, like the AM and PM addresses must match and must be the residential address, and this will help us out with contact tracing. So if a student needs to be quarantined, that student hasn't been riding with on like multiple buses with different students. We know exactly who those students are if we have to quarantine a entire bus. Seats will be offered first to students with special needs, and then um, the other eligibility criteria will fall in line. Um, We will also ensure that transportation is provided if it's a part of a student's IEP or the McKinney-Vento. And we will also set the criteria for which transportation students will be A-day students versus B-day students once that time to select which mode they ride in comes up. Siblings that do not qualify for transportation will not be approved for transportation this year, and that's actually something that we're doing new. But because of the way we have to space students out and the potential for our space to be limited, the criteria is that we are not mandated to transport. We are holding off on those for right now. But as we see what space looks like, we can possibly re-evaluate it mid-year. Excuse me. And it will be extremely challenging for our students to travel to and from school on MTA if current operations continue, meaning like one thing that the MTA is doing different is they are eliminating the standing room. So they are sitting a body in each seat on the bus. However, once every seat is taken, then they will consider that bus to be full and they won't allow additional passengers on. So that's one challenge that we may have to face once schools open up next. Okay. So our current student ridership as of September, for those who are familiar with what these numbers usually look like, it is much lower than what our normal September numbers look. We are transporting about 403 students to and from schools with only using 69 buses, which we usually use well over 300 buses around this time of the year. So using 69 buses transporting 403 students, the operation is at a much lower level than what we are traditionally used to. So we're transporting to 15 SLCs, which are our student learning centers, 2 separate public day schools. We are transporting students amongst 10 of our schools to a North Bay Academy program for 6th graders, and we are transporting to 3 non-public sites as of 25th.
Mr. Marshall, can I take a break for 1 second? Commissioner Bondima, did you have a question about this slide?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. I just have a quick question. When we talk about cleansing the buses and the times that you're doing it, is the bus driver responsible for wiping down or cleansing the bus in between pickups?
Yeah, so it's in between the bus driver and the bus aide. They actually tag team because some of our routes have limited time in between to wipe the high touch points down before. But to answer your question, yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else on the slide before we move forward?
I think you're good.
Okay. Okay, and thank you too, because I can't see hands if they are raised for some reason. As far as the MTA update, previously MTA had announced that they were going to reduce some transit bus services. They later recanted that and then decided to focus more on the MARC train and commuter bus service to reduce the savings not savings, but the budget cuts that they had to make. So they have proactively initiated enhanced daily wipe down of vehicles to include disinfecting areas with high passenger touch points, similar to what we are doing on our yellow buses as well. Their vehicles are completely disinfected daily. Interior services of vehicles receive additional midday wipe downs. That's the high touch services that I spoke on earlier. And on the MTA buses, stations like the ticket vending machines and the fare gate readers, they are disinfected daily. The proposed winter adjustments, as I said earlier, they're going to focus on the MARC train and commuter buses to scale back some of their service, as opposed to the MTA bus service. and this is after a lot of collaboration with us and them, as well as feedback from the community that that was highly against reducing the not the commuter train, I'm sorry, the public train, the public bus service. Oh, and also all riders will be required to wear a face mask on the MTA bus as well, and that goes for our students as well. So MTA bus lines do service our mill sites. This slide shows you which bus links are servicing each site, but as we open up more sites, the bus that service that area could be taken by our students to get to those mill sites. And MTA tickets are still available for our students to get to and from mill sites if they are doing virtual learning. And those are the students who fit that MTA criteria.
Mm-hmm. Commissioner, this is Bundim. I have another question.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Okay, good. I'm not going to. This is short. The MTA buses that say they sterilize those buses, they do that in the beginning. They do that once a day.
So
is that just once a day?
At bare minimum, it is once per day. They completely sterilize the entire bus once a day. But in addition, they do midday wipe downs of the high touch surfaces.
Okay, my concern is that those MTA buses, after they service our students, they use those buses in between for regular pickup and regular service to sit the community. Is that correct?
I'll say yes and no, because even when they pick up our students, those are still public bus lines. So
right.
The public can get on while our students are on the bus.
Okay, my concern is that they might wipe down and clean and cleanse those buses in the beginning of the day, but those buses are actively being used all through the day. So they might not get wiped down after they service and service the community. And then at some point they do pickup for our students. But all through the day, people are coming and going and coming and going, and there's no sterilization going on in between that. What kind of plan do they have with that? Because even though they do the right thing in the morning, what happens in between that period when, all sorts of activity goes on the bus? So nothing, go ahead.
I believe that's what the midday wipe downs are, but something that we couldn't do, because we do meet with MTA pretty frequently, is to confirm exactly what time, whether it's one set time for all buses, or if, depending on the bus route, if that midday wipe down could happen at a different time. I could get more clarification on that, but go ahead.
No, I know this is difficult and is for everybody, and I'm not trying to make it any more difficult, but these are questions that we ask that's really important. Is it any way possible that they could put on those buses a container that's glued to the floor, and they put large wipes that as people get on and off, they can snatch one of the wipes, or something can wipe their hands? Because it's difficult for all of us to try to cleanse a bus that's all day long, and I'm clear on that. However, it's really critical that we understand that even after that bus has been cleansed with the children and other activity going on, that does not mean that bus is okay to get on. But it would be a great idea in your conversation, and I'm sure it will cost money, to put something on that bus, a container where people can take like you do in a grocery store or anywhere, where they can wipe their hands when they sit down, and even when they put their hands on the pole, they can wipe that pole or something, because it doesn't mean anything if the bus has been cleansed and then a whole slew of people get on the bus, and then it doesn't get wiped down until two or three times. It's just a very difficult problem to solve. And I do understand it, but I would be remiss if I didn't bring that up. Okay.
No, that's a good point, and we will definitely bring that up with our next meeting with MTA to see if that is a possibility. And I get your point. Even though they're getting wiped down midday, it would be nice if the public would have the
You could get one
opportunity.
person to get on the bus, and all our kids or people, anybody in the community could follow right behind them, and then it would be a problem. Okay. Thank you.
No
I
problem.
have one question, and then Commissioner Reed, I'll come to you. Just as a matter of definition, Mr. Marshall, could you define tripper service for those that are tuning in today?
Sure.
Thank you.
So tripper service is it's a public MTA service. However, it is primarily aimed to transport a mass number of students to certain schools who have a high MTA population. So, prime example, in the PM, the tripper bus service would start at the school. Students would board either at the school or about a block away from the school. But once that bus pulls off, it then turns into a public MTA line.
Thank you. Commissioner Reed?
Good slides. I like your slides on page 2 and page 4. But I get back to what Commissioner Bundima talked about. I guess on page 4, you show 603 students, but on page 5, you show 403 students. And I guess getting to the 200 for MTA. These two MTA students are older students, but my feeling is their parents would be really leery based on everything Commissioner Bondima said. Why put my kid on a bus that I maybe wiped down once with people they don't know? So how do we increase the comfort level for the parents for those 200 kids? Sure, they're the older kids, but they may be as young as 6th graders. And they're going to get on the bus. They may not be able to social distance. They'll have a mask on. They can't touch anything, but they still may be in close proximity to people that may be COVID positive and they don't know about it. So how can we make those 200 parents for those 200 kids feel comfortable? That's one question. But I can get to some other questions later, but that's what's scaring me is the whole MTA effect on the school population, those student population.
So,
and it
about
magnifies when you go from 603 kids. We haven't even talked about 38,000 kids. We're just talking 600 kids.
Okay, so for the question about how to make the community comfortable,
yes.
So there has already been community engagement taking place just to engage the community, one, to get their feedback, but to also let them know what we are doing differently. But I honestly don't think that everybody's going to be comfortable, even after multiple engagements between city schools or between MTA and the community. I think over time there will be, but especially in the beginning months of when schools open back up, everybody's not going to be comfortable. We can continue to engage the community to make as many people as possible comfortable, but I think actually experiencing what happens on the bus is going to be the best factor that'll make the community comfortable, as opposed to just reading about it or hearing about it from a virtual presentation. So it's going to take time. We do acknowledge that, and we all are kind of learning as we go along as well, because this is new for everybody. So just I think one thing that's important is for the communities to know that, one, we do take this pandemic seriously, and two, we are going to do everything in our will to make our students as safe as possible.
one thing I've come to realize over the last month or so is how important communication is. So what's the level of what's the partnership between you and the Office of Engagement, and what has gone out to the public in terms of communication, and have we seen it as a board? Because your slides are terrific, but I'm guessing, like you said, there's been community engagement, but what do we know as a board was the engagement in the community? Is there hard data? Is there printed data? Is there Office of Engagement data? So how can we be cognizant of, because right now it's probably more important for us as commissioners to know what's being disseminated out of district, so we can help district in terms of just the cross-lateral communication.
So if I can, Robin, if I can just jump in for that point, there has been cross collaboration between the Transportation Operations Office and the Engagement Office, and so one of the things is we just recently hired our engagement, an engagement specialist that actually sits in the engagement office that supports the operations team, and they would be supporting us for these types of things related to transportation. The other thing is that there's a survey that's going to go out to communities, and the transportation team has some of those questions related to this specifically to go out to some of our families. And then the other opportunities that we have to talk to the team, to the community, and I think that we're going to continue to work with the engagement office on how we communicate some of these transportation related things with the community. But we also, during town hall meetings, we get a lot of those transportation questions. And on the front end, when we first started the town hall meetings, we got a lot of questions that we were able to follow up.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Washington. I'm glad you're in the room. And I guess the other thing is, what can we as commissioners do to help in the process?
So I would say, and then I can definitely turn it back over to Robin, is I would say it's continually asking those pointed questions and ensuring that some of the concerns are being represented in some of the information that we're communicating. Like, as you said, I think that's a really good point about how we are communicating this information to our communities on a frequent basis, in what method and format. And so I think that just continually pushing us to make sure that we're being transparent and communicating with our communities is helpful.
Yeah, because we're only talking 403, maybe 603 kids, but if everything was a perfect world, you'd have 38,000 kids. So that's what's gives me reason to be alarmed. If it's tough to do 600, how tough will it be to do 38,000? It's almost impossibility. Thank you.
Commissioner Roberts?
Commissioner Bondima.
I just wanted one quick question to Dr. Washington. Dr. Washington, I think that you guys are doing an excellent job considering this situation we're in. The one thing that I am great concerned that I've just shared with you is we ask questions about situations that in the situation that we're in, we could be in a dangerous situation. How, when we ask these questions, it's the type of questions that I'm asking, and I'm going on the side of a scientist right now, knowing that this microorganism that's floating all over us, we're doing a great job. We're doing a great job when we use our buses, and we can cleanse those buses. But my great concern is the MTA buses. And when we talk about this right now, what is it, after I mention it, after we talk about it and we present it to you, what is it that you will do after we have this conversation? Will you have a meeting, have a conversation, evaluate what we're saying? Because right now, this virus is increasing, and I'm worried about those kids that get on those community buses after they drop our kids off and they go out all over the city of Baltimore and they do a wipe down. How soon can we get something done after we present it to the MTA or whoever the contractors are? What I'm saying, I hate to leave this meeting and think that it's just a conversation. And some people say, well, we're just running our mouth. This piece I'm talking about, to me, and I'm sure to all of us, is absolutely critical.
And Commissioner Bondima, I'd like to add to that because I do know that the district, we have our own internal contact tracing processes and team members that work on that before they do the warm handoff to the Baltimore City Health Department to do their steps that they do for contact tracing. And so to your point, Commissioner Bondima, what effort, like what does that process look like for the students that are taking the Tripper buses in terms of contact tracing? Like, how are we able to track that outside of the yellow buses or the curb to curb before the MTA? What does that process look like?
Well, thank you. But my great concern right now, because we can't do everything right away if we've already put a process in place. My great concern right this minute is, until we figure it out, is to put on those buses, those MTA buses that pick up people all over to our kids, put some type of wipes or some sterilization on those buses. So when they get on and off, they could just grab them. It's real easy to do. I mean, it's very basic to grab something so they can wipe their hands and wipe this around the seat that they're sitting. They do it on the airplane because people are coming and going on those airplanes. If they could just grab something and wipe it until we come to some new procedure that it will never be completely resolved, but this is to make things settle with the parents and the students and make us feel like we're doing more, because we're in trouble if we don't think of something that our kids can do when they enter those buses after they've been wiped down maybe once or twice a day.
So I will, so it's two questions. The first one is around the ability, the consistent sanitizing of the buses and some of the recommendations. What we can do is, Robin and team can take some of the recommendations back to the MTA, but again, the MTA is not under our authority or control. We can give recommendations to the MTA, and that's what we have been doing. We've been providing feedback to the MTA of any impacts of things that are happening on our buses. We also shared with the MTA, even during a public city council meeting, some of the concerns that families had around MTA that they had voiced and expressed during our town hall meetings. And so that's the next step for us, would be to take these concerns and go back to the MTA and provide this recommendation. And, Robin, we can definitely give a follow back up to the board, just saying like this was MTA's responsiveness to that request. To the contract tracing piece, Commissioner Roberts, I think that we would have to, again, give another follow-up. I don't know exactly what the full process is unless Robin knows that right now on hand, but we would definitely need to do a follow-up, and that's a really good question.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much.
And I would definitely follow up on what MTA's response is. They may already have something in place, but if not, we would definitely push that and inform you all of what their response is.
Thank you, Dr. Washington and Mr. Marshall. We are going to let you finish your presentation because I'm sure they have additional questions, but out of respect for your time and your preparation, we'd like for you to finish.
Not a problem. So just some past transportation tasks that happen. Our drivers and attendants are in compliance with MSDE in terms of their in-service trainings. Our in-house drivers have been reassigned to support the student learning centers as proctors, but we do look forward to getting them back before school start. Yellow bus tours, and Mr. Vernon, this actually kind of answers your question earlier about community engagement, partially answers your question. We did yellow bus tours with the community engagement office, one to provide information to families, but also have city school staff on hand to answer any questions that they may have, and especially questions about their about the protocols of keeping their kids safe, with the COVID-19 mandates. Transportation to in-person summer enrichment programs, that happened over the summer. We started transporting to non-public schools sometime in July, and we're currently transporting to public day schools as well as the student learning centers right now. And
Thanks.
over the go ahead.
No, I was saying thank you, and what you may want to use as your success this summer as a template of how you can succeed in the winter. I mean, because it was really successful this summer. I would use that as this is an example of what we're trying to do. But I appreciate what you're trying to do. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, and we also delivered not only learning package to students when the virtual learning first started, but we also delivered supplies to mill sites and schools. And any further questions?
Can you explain A and B? That's down the road, but how daunting is that A day, B day, and how many kids are we talking? And can we really make that transition?
A rough number, we're talking about 2,500 students transported via yellow bus per day, and well, that's curb to curb, and that's a rough estimate because families still have the option to opt in or opt out, so we don't necessarily know how many families will utilize yellow bus transportation, but on a high level, it's about 2,500 students per day. With social distancing standards, it actually helps. The A day, B day does help because there's less students per day to transport. And let's say all the students that we transported last year decide to receive transportation this year, that would be about close to 5,000 students per day if we did not have the A day, B day. So that helps us out tremendously when it comes to social distancing and still being able to supply the service that our students deserve. And there was the second part to the question.
No, I'm good. Thank you. I'm good.
Okay.
Thanks.
Mr. Marshall, I have a couple questions. Could we go to, one of my first questions, Dr. Washington referenced a survey. One, I was interested to see what information we'd be looking for in that survey. When will it go out? What languages will the survey be offered in, and where will it be disseminated? That's something that the board has been receiving so frequently around the dissemination, the lack of translation of the surveys, and when they go out or the time period that it's been out for. So could you give some context to that?
As far as the time period, I believe that still needs to be determined because there's multiple departments that are going to contribute to the survey. So I couldn't answer that from where I sit right now, but after collaborating with the office to see what information we want to put out and what time frame best serves to put that info out, we would be able to answer that question. But as far as what transportation is looking for in the survey, one, what is your comfort level with utilizing yellow bus transportation as well as MTA transportation? And if you are uncomfortable, what makes you uncomfortable, just so we can better understand what people's reluctancy may be to utilize MTA or yellow bus transportation. But for those who do state that they do want to use transportation, something that is very critical for us is what is your current address? Because due to coronavirus, there has been a lot of movement with homes. So getting an accurate address, one, is important to us because we don't want to go on first day of in-person learning to the address they were living at last year before the pandemic. So that is very critical, and it's just better understanding what their comfort level is and ask them questions to inform us of things that we may not have thought of to do that may ease the community's comfort level more.
And so we can follow up on the timeline for the survey and some of the other details of the survey. It's being ran out of Chief Highcover's office. And so it's still going through the vetting process.
Thank you. My second question would be around the mill site. So I think that was slide 7. We've also, to the board, received a little bit of criticism around the amount of time that it for students' lunch breaks for them to get to a mill site. So could you tell us a little bit more about the transportation services to the mill sites? Because from the emails, what we gather is that there's not enough time for some families to, and during their students' lunch break, to get to a mill site, consume lunch, get back home, and actually engage back into instruction.
So time to and from mill sites definitely varies depending on where these students live at. So I could see if a student lived in an area where there was not a mill site that was 1 bus away, how maybe transferring to multiple buses could increase that time some.
And if I can drop Robbins, I think the other consideration was given for the food and nutrition team, and I can definitely follow up to get more clarity on that one, was around providing both breakfast and lunch. So that students don't have to come back to the meal sites during lunchtime, because I definitely am very sure that there is going to be an interruption, not just for the fact that they may, as Robin is saying about the transfers, but also because of the social distancing that's being practiced on the MTA buses. So they're not taking as many, the capacity is very different too. So I'm definitely sure that that's an additional delay for students if they're trying to leave their home site and take the bus to a meal site and then try to return in time for afternoon instruction. I'm definitely sure that that's a problem.
I think that was it for my questions. Commissioner Bondima, do you have any more questions?
No, thank you. And I appreciate the answers that I received. Thank you, Dr. Washington. And thank you for the, the information.
Commissioner Reed, any questions?
No, very good job, Mr. Marshall. And thanks again for being on the line, Dr. Washington. Appreciate it. Page 2 and page 4 were really good. Thank you.
Yes, I agree. Slide 2 and slide 4 were very helpful. Thank you to the transportation team. Thank you to Dr. Washington for the presentations. And we look forward to learning more about the survey that is forthcoming. Next up, we have the district recruitment update.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Jeremy Grant Skinner, the Chief Human Capital Officer, and for today's presentation and discussion, I am joined by Diane Sellers, Director of Recruitment and Selection, who will speak in a few moments, and I will just take one moment to share my screen. Great. So today, I wanted to begin by just sharing some highlights from the opening of our 2020-2021 school year that really reflect some of the outcomes of our recruitment efforts, particularly for teachers, but I will also share a couple of highlights around staff other than teachers. When we do look at teachers, we had already reached a long-time low in the number of teacher vacancies on day 1 in 2019. And then really it was the lowest we had seen in at least a decade. And then this year we were able to then again cut that number in half. So we had about 40 teacher vacancies at the beginning of this year, which is about 0.5% of all of our teacher positions in the district. So essentially fully staffed. And when we look at traditional schools only, that first day fill rate was even a bit higher than all schools together. And this also represented a significant increase in the number of schools that opened with no vacancies. So that went from 100 last year, which was a high for many years, up to 133 this year, leaving only about 30 schools that had any teacher vacancies on day one. Partly, although this is a presentation about recruitment, I want to note that this is also a result of improvements in retention. So we had just experienced the first 2 years where we had back-to-back retention rates above 85% in 2018 and 2019. And then this year, certainly influenced by the pandemic and people's reactions to the pandemic, we actually had a big jump in teacher retention where 89% of our teachers who were in a classroom last year returned to a classroom teacher position this year. I also want to highlight our work around the recruitment of Black African American teachers, given that this has been a focus of ours, including the CEO, including the Human Capital Office, and including a working group that we brought together beginning in the spring of 2018 to focus on continuing to improve our recruitment and retention of Black teachers. We have seen very good movement in the last few years in this area. So when we look at the 10 years from 2006 to 2015, the percentage of our new teacher hires each year that were Black was just about 1/3. And then when we look at the most recent 5 years, that average is 49%. So we've been between 47 and just over 50% for each of the last 5 years. And when we compare that 10-year trend to the trend for the past 5 years, that represents 400 more Black teachers than we would have hired in those 5 years if we had just continued the trend that was in place up until 2015. And when we look at two other groups of teachers, one, Black male teachers, who across the country represent about 2% of teachers, and second, Latinx teachers, who are particularly important to the district these days, given that our Latinx student population has been growing dramatically. We have been growing both of these numbers for the last 3 years to the point that we are at all-time highs at this point for the number of Black male teachers and the number of Latinx teachers. So we've been able to recruit better overall and also ensure that our recruitment yields a teacher population that is even more reflective of our student population. There is not a slide for this, but what I want to also share is when we look at vacancies overall for all positions in the district, including teachers, including related service providers, other school-based staff, and district office staff, we currently have fewer vacancies from a numbers standpoint and from a percentage of all positions standpoint than any time in the last 10 years. And we only looked back from 2011 to 2020 to compare that. So we are at a much better place than we have been with respect to our ability to fill vacancies across the board. And with those few highlights to start us off, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Sellers to talk more about principal recruitment and teacher recruitment.
Good morning, everyone. So this slide highlights our recruitment strategies. Last year, for the first time in roughly half a decade, we did an external media recruitment blitz. So this allowed us to attract higher quality candidates, including DC recruits and a number of candidates who were not placed but are still in our eligibility pool, as well as proactively ensure talent alignment with schools. So in addition, we revamped our Grow Your Own programs. So we have the Accelerated Assistant Principal program as well as the Resident Principal program. And this positioned us to better attract, develop, and retain talent already in our community who had established relationships and connections with our students. It also allowed us to draw from people who weren't ready but were almost ready for the role, and provide support to those who needed support and who wanted to enter the profession.
Commissioners, I would just note here also that principal recruitment and building of internal pipelines is a topic that is regularly of interest both to the operations committee and the teaching and learning committee. So we're often bringing overlapping information to the two committees. So I would just highlight that you can look at an August 4th teaching and learning committee update that goes into more detail also about these. And then certainly we can answer questions about it today too.
I'm hungry.
Thank you, Commissioner Chief Grant.
So now I'm gonna, when Jeremy has a chance to advance, you'll see the slide, but now I'm gonna go over our recruitment and selection timeline for principals and APs. So recruitment mainly happened between October and February. And so that will be the same for this coming year. You can move on to the next slide where I'm going over the timeline. Thank you. Information sessions. So we hosted sessions to promote city schools and the principal role to ensure that prospects were equipped with information necessary to complete their application. And we will continue to hold information sessions this recruitment season between October and February. The assessment center, that's our diagnostic tool that is aligned with the instructional framework that ensures that candidates come with a wide range of competencies and fit for city schools. It's hosted by Human Capital and the Chief of Schools Office. There were 4 that were facilitated last school year between February and April. Candidate profiling. So we host several, you can go back to that slide, Jeremy. We host several AP and principal candidate profiling sessions to include compiling candidates' experiences, education, assessment center results, and other related skills. ILEDs and chiefs use these profiles throughout the year to support principal placement and fit. And then we also had meet and greets last year. And so this gave candidates the opportunity to quote unquote speed date with ILEDs, and so that EDs could familiarize themselves with candidates to even better support school placement and fit. This slide gives us more information about when principal candidates became available throughout the year, as well as the strength of our pool. So if you look at the first row, you can see that 21 candidates transitioned over from their application from the 1920 school year into last school year. And then there were 3 assessment centers where candidates also became eligible. That number actually should be 47 at the end as opposed to 39. So there were actually 47 eligible candidates at the end of last season. The second row talks about our tiering system, and I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about that on the next slide, but that just shows the breakdown at each point of candidate eligibility. What was their breakdown in terms of the tiering system that we have? And this talks about our tiering system. So it's a 3-level system: gold, silver, and bronze. And you can see the qualifications for each as well as the touch points. So the touch points vary by what tier someone is in. Our strongest prospects we label gold, and we use the touch points that are outlined here. So you can see that the gold prospects have the strongest qualifications, and therefore they receive the highest touch points and the highest amount of communication, are all the way down to our bronze. So it differentiates based on what level they're at. All candidates do receive touch points from our team. However, again, it is differentiated based on whether or not they're gold, silver, or bronze. So I mentioned the profiling sessions. This is an example of one of the profiles that was completed. After the profiling, the 4 steps that are listed on the right take place leading up to the CEO appointment to the board. So now we're going to transition and talk about teacher recruitment. So as Chief Grant Skinner previously mentioned, we opened the school year with the lowest number of teacher vacancies in recent history. This chart shows the breakdown of vacancies by subject area, as well as traditional schools versus charter school vacancies. And this shows the number of new teacher hires by content area. As you can see, we continue to hire the greatest number of teachers in early childhood, elementary education, English, as well as special education. So this slide talks about key attributes for the 2020-2021 new teacher cohort. Before I actually go through these numbers, one thing that I want to frame this slide a little bit more. So this data is only looking at teachers who were brand new to the district. So it does not include individuals who transition from substitute to teacher or from para to teacher. If we include those individuals in these numbers would actually be hired. So looking at just the brand new teachers to our district who were not in another role before coming here, 56% identified as people of color, 45% identified as Black, 52% live in Baltimore City, 29% of new teachers have a master's degree or higher. We had a 52% increase in ESOL teachers from last school year, and 35% attended a Maryland college or university. So due to the pandemic, all of the recruitment efforts shifted to 100% virtual last year. And this slide outlines how we did that. So we participated in a number of virtual career events. We had registered to attend in person over 30 events last year. And so the vast majority of them transitioned to being virtual. And so we were still able to attend those events just virtually. We led weekly recruitment webinars. So twice a week, the recruitment team led informational webinars to provide candidates with information about how to apply to become a teacher with City Schools. So illuminating that process as well as the benefits of teaching with us. We increased our postings on external sites as well as social media. So there were some sites that we were not posting on that we decided to post on. There were some sites where we had a limited number of posts, and so we increased that. And then we also partnered again with communications to launch more social media ads than we had in years prior. So we had partnered with them before, but we did that even more. We partnered with TNTP, who offered best practices regarding virtual recruitment, including supporting with the creation of a comprehensive online recruitment and social media plan. And then they also provided training to the recruitment team to help us improve our candidate cultivation efforts, particularly in a virtual setting, to expand the number of applicants in the pool. We hosted a virtual hiring event. So we know that this is really important for principals. And so it was important for us to be able to still have hiring events, but make them virtual. So we selected Premier Virtual as an online platform. It allowed us to host virtual hiring events where principals could engage with candidates in real time through online chatting so that they could then schedule follow-up interviews. So a couple of benefits to the virtual hiring events. They allowed for greater flexibility in the frequency that we could hold events. It also, which is not here, it allowed candidates who were not local at the time to still be able to participate. So we had a greater number of participation than we would for in-person events. And it allowed us to tailor events to more specific needs. So we could have a hiring event just for a particular subset of schools or just for a particular content area, which was more difficult to do when they were in person.
Commissioner, my hand is up. Commissioner Roberts.
I'm sorry, I saw your hand up and then I saw it go down. Do you have a question for Ms. Sellers?
Yes, thank you. I didn't want to interrupt, but yeah, I'm back to the other slide where you showed where you have the gold, silver, and bronze list of people who qualify. It is a national emergency, I think, that that we hire the best and the finest teachers. what kind of incentives do we offer to teachers to get the gold, the silver teachers? And for example, we have always had a program, and I don't know if you introduced that program to new teachers or teachers coming into the area, a teacher police program where you have a opportunity to get buy property if you live in a city, and they have a number of other incentives that flow through the mayor's office to encourage people to move into the city. But do we offer any type of incentive? Because where we ask the teachers to have all these wonderful qualifications, like everybody else in the country are asking the same teachers and grabbing those gold and silver qualified teachers. What are we doing to pull those teachers in our direction?
So that's a great question. This tiering is actually not for teachers. This is for principal candidates.
Okay,
So
I
the
wanted to
gold,
ask
silver,
that
and
question.
bronze.
I wanted to ask that question when we were in the teacher area, and that still applies for principals as well.
Sure. So, and Chief Grant Scanner, feel free to jump in here to talk more specifically about school leaders and any incentives there. In terms of teachers, there are a variety of incentives. Our teachers who are graduating from college, they seem to be very interested in our district's tuition reimbursement program. That's very attractive to them. One of the things that I'm going to talk about is how we have been really thinking through different value propositions, because there are different incentives or different benefits of working in our district that appeal to different groups of teachers depending on where you are in your period of life. So for example, as you all probably no, we started recruiting in Puerto Rico, not this past year, but the year before. And something that we learned is what was really appealing to candidates in Puerto Rico was finding out information about our Social Security as well as our retirement, because that's something that is not available to them there. So as we continue to explore different value propositions, and one of the things that we are exploring doing is talking to some of our new teachers to find out more about what attracted them to the district. Then we will be able to cater those incentives, as you mentioned, in a more strategic way. Because some, as you saw, already live in Baltimore, may already own a home here, and so the Teacher Next Door program may not be what really attracts them to the district. So we want to find out more about what are the different value propositions that actually attract teachers to our district, so that we can change our pitch, modify our pitch to make sure that we are putting that information in front of the right candidates.
Commissioner Bandima, I would share a couple of things to add to that. So one is that we know that salary alone is not itself going to attract candidates, but it's certainly part of the story for a candidate. So Baltimore City happens to have one of the highest starting salaries of any district in the country at over $51,000. And as I think we've shared with the board previously, because of our teacher career pathway opportunities, when we look at fifth year teachers as an example, compared to other places in the state, our average fifth year teacher makes significantly more than the average fifth year teacher in other districts here in Maryland. And we know that extends beyond Maryland. So we have a benefits package that starts with base salary that is compelling. And I will say that for principals, we believe that is the case too. The board knows that we have increased the starting principal salary for principals significantly through our last two contract negotiations. It was in the low 90s and is now $110,000, which is much more reflective of the responsibilities of the role and much more competitive. And then also we have career pathways for principals, where our best principals can move on to become transformational principals, or in the future distinguished principals. And then so that's part of it. The second thing I wanted to add is that Diane talked some about the way we ensure a strong match for principals, and that's a big part of our process for hiring teachers as well. And can provide district-wide benefits, and you can tell a compelling story about the district. And what matters to candidates is feeling comfortable that they will have a good match with a particular school community, with a particular school leader. And therefore, part of Diane's team's work has been also to move up the process for recruitment and selection altogether, and also the time during the year when principals engage in that process. This year we had about 100 more teacher recommendations to hire before May than we did a year ago, and that means we set up a process that got principals in contact with more teachers earlier, so teachers could see what the conditions would be like and what the culture would be like in a particular school, which helps with recruitment, and then certainly we believe helps with long-term retention as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question about page 13, page 12 and 13. Can you hear me? No?
I can hear you, Commissioner. I'm not seeing the numbers right now, so.
Okay, it's the one about where you talk about bronze. And I guess my question is, why have bronze at all? I mean, it sounds like you can do better than hiring the bronze teachers. I mean, do you just stick with the gold and the silver? Because you want the best and the brightest. So why consider the bronze at all?
Yeah, I would say, again, we have used this with principal candidates to tier them, and we, I think, did not actually hire any principals who had been tiered bronze for this year. I would say the qualifications that you see listed here, so some of the, like each bullet on its own might not be a reason not to consider someone further. I know when you see all of those bullets together, like someone who doesn't have experience as a principal, has not yet shown significant academic results, doesn't have urban experience, isn't connected to, when you put that all together, certainly point taken, like that is not a quality candidate. I think there are times where people have other things that make them a quality candidate, but one of these things, and this is saying that, it means that we deprioritize them from a standpoint of recruitment. And ultimately, yes, like we are most often looking to and most often do hire people from the top tiers.
And I'll also add to that. So when we're talking about engaging candidates, we need to think long-term as short-term. So even though the bronze candidates may not be strong candidates for the upcoming year, that doesn't mean that they're never going to be a strong candidate for city schools with some more experience, once they have some more experience. So we want to make sure that we've created a positive experience for them so that they keep thinking about city schools, so that they will ultimately reapply and they can be considered another time. We don't want to cut all ties. So it's important that we continue to engage candidates, because we realize that even though they may not be ready now, that doesn't mean that they're not going to be ready in the future.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, so this shows our teacher selection process, which has been the same for the past couple of years. So you may have seen this. So a candidate submits an application online within 48 hours of receiving the completed application. Their application is screened, and that candidate receives communication about whether or not they are moving forward into the process based on their eligibility for the position that they applied to. They have a phone interview with a current teacher in the district. This helps us get additional information about the candidate. It also helps to keep the candidate engaged, because that is the opportunity for them to ask questions of a veteran teacher in the district who teaches the subject that they applied to get more information about our district and help them stay in the process longer. Once they have their phone interview, they're admitted into the qualified candidate pool, which is when principals can see them. Principals and NAPs take the candidates through their school-specific processes to determine fit and whether or not they want to extend an offer. for those who they choose to, and offer is extended, and then the candidate completes new hire paperwork, orientation, as well as fingerprinting, and then the candidate is ultimately hired. So last year was the second year that we had a group of teacher support with recruitment as teacher ambassadors. We hired 39 teacher ambassadors, 20 to conduct the phone interviews that I mentioned on the previous candidates, and then 19 to keep candidates engaged until they were hired by a school. So these 19 teachers, they reached out to candidates every single week, either via email or text or both, to check in with them, to answer their questions, to find out about their status. And so this was a very successful strategy that we used last year to have accurate data about the candidate status, but also created a very positive, welcoming candidate experience. And we plan to continue this in some capacity for the upcoming school year. I wanted to highlight just a few new strategies that we plan to implement for this upcoming recruitment season. So one of the things we're doing is we're exploring hiring international teachers again, but this time through the J1 visa process. And that is different from the H1B process in that it does not cost the district any funds other than paying the salary and benefits of the teacher. And we feel that this could be a really strong strategy to help fill high needs content areas such as ESOL and math. We're also planning to soft launch the 21-22 teacher application in November to identify strong candidates, particularly those who are student teaching with city schools early and get early commitments. And we also plan to launch a teacher recruitment website that was designed by TNTP, which highlights key messages and value propositions, like I mentioned before, to attract strong teacher candidates who are committed to city schools. So just to give you a little bit more information about the last bullet point that I mentioned. So as I mentioned in a previous slide, we partnered with TNTP, and one of the products that they produced is a teacher recruitment focused site that seamlessly links to and from our city schools website. It has the same colors, same branding. Its focus is on value propositions that will attract different groups of teacher candidates to city schools. And we will be able to also capture leads from the site so that we can follow up with the prospects. So this just shows you a screenshot of the homepage and then the bottom of the homepage where candidates can actually put in their information and their email address, and it gets sent directly to the recruitment team so that we can immediately follow up on leads to help to cultivate them, to get them from lead to application, to ultimately hire.
Commissioners, we can answer any other questions you have for us at this time.
Commissioner Bondima, do you have any questions?
No, thank you very much. I do not.
Commissioner Reed, do you have any questions?
I'm fine. Thank you very much, Ms. Sellers and Chief.
I have a couple questions, but if we could go back to slide 22 around ESOL and math, looking to recruit internationally.
The J1.
Yes, the J1. Could you just help me to understand or add a bit more context to our student population and what vulnerabilities or what gaps we're looking to fill and utilizing the J1. And I'm saying that from the perspective of we're seeing so many gains with hiring leaders and teachers of color. I know that would potentially be a pushback of recruiting in mass internationally. So could you just offer some perspective to the gaps that you all are seeing in the data for student population?
Sure. So the gap that this is actually our vacancy data. So every year we have a vacancy data. We have vacancies in ESOL, which is a growing population. I mentioned that the number of ESOL teachers increased by, I think it was 56% from last year. So this is a growing population. And then every year we also have math vacancies. These are two high need areas that we, not only our district, but districts across America have a really hard time recruiting for, because there are not the number of teacher candidates who are going into ed programs who are majoring in these areas in math. And so when we're thinking about how are we going to fill the vacancies with high quality candidates, and something that I'll mention about the teachers who would come in through the J1 teacher process, they're already certified. So these would not be teachers who are coming in through as a conditional teacher. These are teachers who are certified veteran teachers in those specific content areas in their countries. And so not only would we be filling the vacancies that we know exist every year for these high need areas, we would be filling them with high quality veteran teachers, which is also something that we would have a difficult time doing, because a lot of time in the high need areas, we would have to fill it with candidates who would come in on conditional. So does that clarify about the need and where that comes from?
Yes, that does. And it's a perfect pipeline into my next question, which is just generally around the costs associated with recruitment. I know that this was brought up in the spring as we started to approach the end of the fiscal year. But could you tell me some of the effects that COVID has had on recruitment initiatives, or not really initiatives, attempts, as we are in the COVID environment where we see, discourse with teacher and leadership unions, and as we're moving forward into a modified hybrid environment, what type of effects will that have on our recruitment internationally and locally?
So that's a great question. So I think my team was pleasantly surprised when we shift to 100% virtual, that the transition was a little smoother than we thought it would be. Engaging with candidates, because candidates, particularly candidates who are right out of college or graduating from college, they're used to engaging virtually anyway, and so it was shifts that more so my team had to make than the candidates had to make. This also allowed us to get in front of candidates who we otherwise would have had a hard time getting in front of, because if there are fairs that are happening virtually, because of budget reasons, we may not have been able to travel to Arizona to go to a fair. And I point out Arizona because that is an area that our ESOL department has called out, where we need to do more recruitment, particularly for ESOL. But we may not have been able to travel to Arizona necessarily, but we can certainly participate in a virtual fair that the University of Arizona is doing. And we can do webinars, which is what my team has been doing to get more information to candidates no matter where they are. One of the platforms that we invested in more was Handshake. Handshake is an amazing platform that over 90% of colleges and universities are a part of, and it means all of their students are actually a part of, to the point where once their student matriculates into their college or university, they have to put their information into Handshake. So this allows us to actually get in front of candidates, to source for candidates at a very specific granular level, so that we can target our recruitment efforts, so that we can find those candidates who are otherwise very difficult to find. So the virtual setting, I think, ultimately has really helped us. And even when conditions make it possible for us to be more in person again, which of course we love because we're the recruitment team, we're still going to use a lot of these online strategies, because it actually does help us to expand our reach in a way that we weren't able to do before, just recruiting in person.
Commissioner Roberts, I know time is tight, so I will try to add this quickly to say, I think a broader point that's in your question, I want to be forthright and say that I started this presentation by sharing that in the context of the pandemic, we had our highest teacher retention probably ever. And we recognize that that is temporary, that, other districts experienced something similar this year, where given the interest in job security and certainty, and also probably a lot of wait and see what's to come, more teachers decided to stay in their role. And yet everyone, whether it is longer term virtual instruction or a return to in-person hybrid instruction, everyone is doing something different than what they used to do, and in some cases what they feel they signed up for. And I would just say that regardless of what model is in place in the months and the year ahead, that we recognize that our recruitment hill to climb in the year ahead is really steep, and that's not us as one district, but across districts, as the teaching and learning environment has changed significantly from what it used to be.
Thank you for that, Chief Grant Skinner and Ms. Sellers. That's something that the board is very aware of, and we see it in the news, we see it in our district, we see it in our email inboxes. We are aware of it. So thank you so much for being so transparent and, quite honestly, vulnerable about that. Ms. Sellers, were you done your presentation, or did we cut you off?
That was it.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, because we can get a little crazy. If there are no more questions, thank you so much, Chief Grant Skinner and Ms. Sellers, for your presentation. We can move on to procurement.
Good morning, Commissioners. It's Joe Vogel. I'm the Interim Director of Procurement. There are 6 items on the agenda today. Commissioner Roberts, would you like me to go through each, or due to time, would you like to go right to questions that the Commissioners may have?
Hello, Joe. Actually, I think we can just go through individually. We don't have anything else on the agenda today.
Oh, okay, great. The first item is a contract with SAS Institute to provide annual maintenance and support services, as well as programming services. Total cost, $66,011, and the contract term is October 28th of 2020 through October 27th of 2021. The next item is a competitively solicited contract with James River Solutions and PAPCO. They will provide number 2 heating oil service to Baltimore City buildings. The estimated annual contract amount is $5 million, and the contract term will be October 28th of 2020 to October 27th of 2023, with 1 2-year option.
Joe, I do have a question about that. For this contract, for the renewal, how many of our buildings receive oil service?
Hello, this is Blaine Lipsky, Director of Facility Operations. We have approximately 83 buildings that require oil services. And it's this was a publicly solicited new solicitation with 1 new bidder and 1 repeat. PAPCO is a repeat vendor. James River Solutions, JRS, is the new primary winner.
Got it. Thank you so much, Blaine.
Welcome.
Thanks, Blaine. The next item is a contract increase with Team Service Corporation of New York from $400,000 annually to $1.2 million annually. The contract provides emergency generator maintenance and repair services. The board originally approved this contract on July 25th of 2017, and it has a contract term of August 1 of 2017 through July 31st of 2022. The next item is a contract increase with Team Service Corporation of New York from $1 million.
Joe, I'm sorry.
Yes,
can we go to the last one?
Yes, go ahead.
For 1503 is the only update to that contract for the filters, the upgrade to the MERV 13 filters?
No, for the emergency generators.
On 1503.
Oh, okay, we haven't gone. Okay, I'm sorry.
Wait, I thought we did there.
Okay, the next one is for filters, motors, and repair services to the univents to ensure that there's proper circulation in the actual classrooms per the recommendation of getting fresh air in and circulation. So it's a combination of motors, exchange of air, and filters to be replaced in the univents. 2, when you replace the motors that are bad, they replace the motors and the pumps to ensure the circulation and the operation of the univents.
I remember that we were having the discussion around the potential hybrid model, and I believe it was with Dr. Washington at a previous presentation. I'm sorry, I can't think of it in this moment, but there needed to be an upgrade in filters. So my question, quite honestly, is just around, are these the filters that we needed to upgrade to?
This is an aspect, yes, this is part of the filtration, in addition to the rooftop units, the other units that are throughout the system, but these are the ones that are against the windows in those long metal boxes you see. The filters lie underneath, but yes, this would be part of the MERV 13 filter replacements, yes.
Got it. Thank you.
I guess I have a question that's, I guess, how can I be more cognizant of the decision-making process and the needs? Looks like we need more generators, we need more maintenance, we need MERV. The cost for number one, the first one, has gone from $400K to $1.2 million. The second one's gone from $1 million to $3 million. Is this basically retrofitting the same buildings, or is this anticipatory? What's the whole process? I mean, Dr. Washington probably can help me too. Does all this cross Dr. Washington's desk? And how do we, I continue to ask this question, but how do we see the big picture in terms of all these, how these needs, I know it's on a as-you-go basis and an as-needed basis, but how do you, what makes you go from 400 to 1.2 and 1 million to 3 million? Is it just MERV? Is it just generators? Is it just maintenance? Is it anticipation? Is it real needs? How does that work, Blaine and Joe?
Joe, do you want to start, or do you want me to start? Commissioner, basically what happens is when we put a solicitation out on the street, we review the historic expenditures, we update the solicitation to move forward with any future forecast of needs, such as our new buildings. Our 21st century buildings are all being retrofitted with new generators. So we have an increase of generators. We have new split units coming in that are under the capital design for the air conditioning program. So we try to encourage all that, incorporate all that in the solicitation. But back in 2017, when they did this contract with these vendors, and obviously we didn't anticipate the money for the split units. This is just items that have changed, and it seemed to be an upgrade to our current situation and availability. And it's just forecasting to 2022, our needs with the current situation with COVID, filtration, the increase in the equipment, and our needs operationally with the additional money that the commissioners have approved. We're able to do more work in the buildings as well. So that takes into the majority of the account.
Yeah, and so I agree with Blaine. So there is a forecasting of the work that's going to happen. Again, a lot of the spike also happened with COVID, because not only are we upgrading the filters to MERV 13 filters, but we're also going through when we do, and this is what we sometimes we tend to talk about it in more detail when we present our comprehensive maintenance plan. When we do work in our buildings, preventative maintenance work in our buildings, a lot of times when we're going in to do the preventative maintenance work, we also see a lot of things that we have to repair. And so we have these existing contracts where, before we've set particular limits, then we have to increase them in order for us to be able to do the work under these particular contracts. So yes, there is forecasting of work that additional work that needs to happen, and ensuring that we have the contracts available for us to do that work.
And I guess this gets back to what I talked about in the first grouping. And in transportation, it's probably important for us to communicate through the engagement office, I guess, and make sure the public better understands what we're trying to do in terms of making it safe for the kids on the buses. The same thing is for the buildings. I mean, MERV's really important. upgrading the systems is really important in terms of generators and that kind of thing. Is it also going to be communicated to the public how we're trying to make the buildings safer through MERV? We're working on that.
So we've had communications, but like, as you said, we can be more direct and more explicit with our communications. And that's something that, just recently, the CEO asked us to be a little bit more clear in how we use, infographics and some of those different things like that. So the communication team and our team, we are going to be working together to develop clearer, more specific communication as it relates around the health and safety components of our buildings, highlighting ventilation, because that's something that's key and it's important to families and also our staff and community.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item is a contract increase with Showmore Corporation from $1,223,636 to $2,636,783. The contract provides HVAC system upgrades at Liberty Elementary School. The reason for the increase was once we got into the work, we found rotted and leaking HVAC piping. The board originally approved this contract on February 25th of 2020. And the last item is a contract increase with James Wattam to serve as chief negotiator in labor negotiations on behalf of Baltimore City Public Schools. The contract was initially begun on July 21, and the increase is from $49,990 to $140,000. And that's the last item.
And I have a question. Thank you. Is this what? I can't hear you.
Go ahead, Commissioner Bondima.
Okay, thank you. I have several questions. This contract for $49,999. This includes the $225 an hour. First, that's my first question. Is that the $225 an hour? And how many hours does $49,999 include? How many hours a day does that include, or how many hours is incorporated into that particular contract?
Hi, Commissioner Bondima. It's Josh Sivan, Chief Legal Officer.
Hi, Josh.
I could do the math on my calculator right now. I'm sorry I haven't done it before, but the contract here Mr. Wattam has been our chief negotiator for, I believe, 8 years, and we are just making sure that we have the resources here, given our ongoing engagement with our unions, particularly around COVID-19 planning going forward. But
the 49,
I can follow up with the math if you'd like while we're talking.
Oh yeah, could you please?
I believe that the initial contract was for about little over 200 hours, 222 hours.
Okay. Oh, so he was part-time.
And he remains part-time. So this is services that we do on an as-needed basis, and we only pay on the per-hour basis. So if we do not need the services, we do not pay for them.
Oh, so it would be a $90,000 increase to $140,000, but that's a set aside of $140,000.
Exactly.
So as he's working through the process and working for us, that's the maximum amount that he would receive?
Correct. Exactly correct.
And it's $225 an hour.
Yes, which is a pretty good rate for attorneys these days.
Well, no, I checked and it was sort of high for a negotiator, because when I did a little research on it, and it was a step higher. I mean, than most negotiators. I thought it was pretty high, $225 an hour for an even if he's an attorney.
and has probably his experience is invaluable, both in his knowledge of Baltimore City and also his knowledge more generally of union negotiation across the state and country.
Right. So when we have our negotiations with our union, we usually, of course, have a negotiator. The last time he worked for us, what was his salary before? What was his contract?
So he's been working for us for the past 8 years, and I believe this rate has stayed consistent for a number of years.
So before, when we were negotiating, his contract was 140,000.
I'm sorry, we've increased the amount, but the total not to exceed amount from the contract, but it's the same hourly rate, I believe.
Oh, the same. So could you just let me know what, because it was a long negotiation the last time around. So what was the amount that he received for the last one? Is it you don't have to go do that right now.
I will follow up. We will follow up.
You can follow up and let us know, because it's quite a bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it would be important that we know, and the housing, the lodging, and because I do know negotiations can go through the night. Is it because he doesn't live in the area?
Yes. So in the event that he needs to stay over, that's the.
Does he live in the state of Maryland?
I believe he currently lives in the state of Delaware.
Okay, thank you. Could you get that information for me, please? I would be very interested to know if he's been with us for 8 years. His contract through the years would be at least for the past couple of years.
Absolutely, we can do that.
Thank you, Judge. Thank you. I'm finished, Commissioner.
Thank you. Commissioner Reed, you have any questions?
I'd just like to say thank you. I mean, I looked at page, I guess, the Chilmar, and the Chilmar, the statement you guys said in financial and budget implications, very well written, and I think that covers a lot of times when we ask questions. I guess you guys have really ramped up the level of communication and understanding on our part in terms of the financial and budget implications, and this was a really good distillation for me. So I'm just thanking the staff. I know I beat up on you guys, but you guys have been delivering, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. But that is the last item on the procurement agenda.
Thank you so much. Christian, do we have anyone for public comment?
No, we don't.
Okay, well, that pretty much wraps us for today. Thank you all for your presentations and for tuning in to the October 20th operations meeting. Oh goodness, I don't have the date in front of me. Christian, do you have the date for the next meeting?
I too have to pull it up.
November 17th.
Thank you, Joe.
You are certainly welcome.
We will see you here again, same time, same place on November.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Rodney.